All right, so I'm gonna go through what I do after a drift event for preventative maintenance to make sure to minimize downtime at the track. So usually I warm the car up. It's already warmed up. I'll spare you the noise of that. You don't have to have a lift to do this, but I'm gonna put mine on the lift and I'll kind of go through what I look for. Okay, now that we have it on the lift, usually what I do is I kind of start at the back, or I start with anything that I worked on at the track. So one thing that I did do is I swapped differentials at this last event. So I'm gonna give everything a good shake. I'm gonna check to make sure all the bolts are tight in the CV shafts. I always give these a good bounce, and there really shouldn't be much of a rotation there, and there's not, so that's good. I'll check all this little stuff, like, see, that's loose. These almost always come loose for whatever reason, but I don't tighten them super tight because when you're in a rush or you got a 5-minute call, they get stuck. So it's kind of why I do that. So then I also just kind of look at brake lines and anything that could be rubbing or loose. This is a little off-road adventure I took, so a little grass in there, not a big deal though. All that looks good. And just kind of keep going along here. I'm also looking for leaks. These, for whatever reason, can't get that sealed up very good. And then up here at the front, steering stuff always just wears out. So I'll give these a good shake. Try to shake the tire in and out. Kind of listen for weird clunks or anything that feels loose or, you know, not connected to the other side. See right here, there's a little slop in that washer, so that's probably loose. Yeah, see. And for whatever reason here lately, this side only has been coming loose, so I've been checking it. But that's after a full weekend, full comp. So not a big deal. Everything else is looking pretty good. No real rubbing, no major leaks, doesn't look like. Did quite a bit of work before this last event, so I'll check over anything that I changed at the track. But overall, things look pretty good. So one thing I forgot to look at is these suspension bolts, because I did move those, but those look good. Yep, all that looks pretty good. So, oh, there, let's see, subframe bolt didn't get tightened. Had those loose at the track. That's a, oops, my bad. So I'll look at this. That one looks good. That one looks good. And that one's missing. So obviously something happened there at the track where those didn't get tightened. So that's why you do this, for sure. And back on the front end, if it makes any noise, just be honest with yourself. If there's any sort of noise, get it addressed now, because if it feels a little loose or something feels off, it's probably wrong and it's probably gonna cause headaches down the road. So, but I will say, I had a GK Tech angle kit before, and this is Wise Fab. This kit always stays much tighter, have way less problems with all that stuff. So I'm super happy with all that. Okay, so the next thing that I always do is I change the oil or drain the oil or whatever. I'm kind of a firm believer in doing the oil change after every event. I know some people say you can go more than that, whatever, but I figure $100 an oil change is pretty cheap, and that oil is pretty black. This is VR1, so it's pretty blue or whatever. If you look here at the drain plug, I always look at that, and I'm pretty happy with how that looks, but I'm also pretty critical of it too. I mean, if there's any metal on there, you're gonna start having some wear. So that looks good. So we'll let that drain and then we'll get to the filter next. Okay, so we're running our VR1. It's our last quart. I like to use 2050 VR1. You can use whatever. Seems to work pretty good. I run 8 full quarts. It only calls for 6.5. I know there's windage problems and stuff that can happen because of that, but it's not a concern. I'd rather have that than running out of oil. So then some of the other things that I look at just underneath the hood, I make sure like the radiator's secure still. I check the bolt in there. Power steering cooler looks okay. I did have some collisions, so I'm gonna have to address some of the, like these headlight mounts and stuff like that. It's kind of normal. And then, you know, notice this bigger stuff. Needs some fiberglass work, things like that. But that's all minor. That could all run another event if you don't have time. But all stuff to note before your next event. The other thing is I try to change the power steering fluid every other event. This is pretty fresh. Smells good. Fluid level's good. Also check your clutch master and your brake master for any leaks. I always make sure the pedal feels good. But the cat coming to help. Yeah, you're not much of a helper, but that's okay. So that's kind of the basics of that. Okay, now we're gonna do startup. Make sure we got good oil pressure, everything looks good. Okay, so one thing I like to do is I like to cut the oil filter open and inspect it. You probably should do that before you actually change the oil, just to make sure you don't have any big problems. But since the drain plug looked pretty good, I'm not going to be too worried about it. So I'm going to cut this open real quick. Okay, so I know some people are going to be upset that I used a hacksaw to cut that open. I had a filter cutter. I don't know what happened to it. But I'm going to show you why I don't really worry about the little bit of metal that you get in from the saw. So this right here is the metal that you might get from your saw, but it's not going to get down in here in the pleats. And this is where a lot of people make mistakes. So what I do, just take a razor knife, cut some of this filter element out of here. You don't need a whole lot. It all gets in here the same. And it's fine to open this up and look at it, but in my opinion, you can't really see much. So what you gotta do is you gotta bunch it up like this, wrap it in a shirt or a rag or whatever, and square it up like this, and then pinch it down until you get oil. See the oil saturating in there? That's what you want. And you want to get as much oil out of there as you can. So you give it a good squeeze in a vise. You could use channel locks for this if you don't have a vise. And then spread it open and see how much more papery that filter element looks. So now what we're looking for, and you can see in there, there's some sparkly stuff, but there's no major chunks. So this would, for me, looks okay. I mean, there's a good chance I got some thrust material in here or whatever. That's normal. This car wears out thrust bearings pretty fast. So yeah, there's some stuff in here, but as long as it looks like this every single time, I'm not too worried about it. So I think we're good.